There has been a series of cascading events over the past week in the most dynamic political state in the nation, that being here in Georgia, that has completely reshaped the political landscape for Georgia's wide open and highly contested 2026 elections. This is Political Update for Friday, May 16th, 2025. I'm Tim Darnell, joined by Atlanta's anchorman, Rick Folbaum. Rick, let's take this from a purely a chronological standpoint.
Okay.
Last week, we learned very early that Brian Kemp had decided not to challenge Democratic U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff in his reelection bid in 2026. Later on that week, within a matter of hours, the first GOP Senate candidate emerged, that being U.S. Congressman Buddy Carter, who has represented Georgia's 1st congressional district in southeast Georgia since 2015. Then, late Friday evening, one of the most controversial figures in American politics, Northwest Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, posted a very lengthy statement on social media, really decrying the entire Senate as a legislative institution and saying she was most definitely not going to run for U.S. Senate. She didn't say anything about the governor's race, however. Right. And then on Monday, we come in about 6:30, 6:45, we get an announcement that Georgia Insurance and Fire Safety Commissioner Jon King is entering the race along with Buddy Carter. As of this moment, who knows how many other people are going to jump into this thing.
Who knows? I mean, and it's very interesting. You know, you see Governor Kemp announcing his decision to not run, and then all of the other sort of ducks in a row begin to swim along here and announce their intentions. Marjorie Taylor Greene, obviously, you mentioned the governor's race. She's got something in mind. What is it? We don't know, but we know she is not going anywhere. She certainly likes to put out statements that will generate conversation and talk and headlines, and she has done that with her statement announcing that she would not be entering the race. But it seems like Buddy Carter and Jon King, they had their political ads already cut and ready to go as soon as Governor Kemp announced that he was not going to run. They were deferring to him, and I think that if he had gotten into the race, I don't know that we would have seen too many Republicans challenge him for the Republican nomination. But once he announced that he was not running, we saw Carter and King jump right in, and I suspect in the coming days and weeks we'll see a lot more Republicans put their hats in the race as well.
Let's talk just a moment about Jon King, he being the latest, the current candidate, at least as of this recording, to enter. Pretty interesting story. He replaced the former insurance commissioner, Jim Beck, in 2019. The insurance commissioner was under investigation for theft and fraud, for a series of really now we can honestly say convicted crimes of theft from the American Insurance Underwriters Association, now serving in the middle of a federal prison sentence. Governor Brian Kemp appointed Jon King, who is of Mexican descent. He is a decorated law enforcement and military officer, and he ran for the office outright and won an election on his own outright in 2022. Is the first Latino ever elected to a Georgia statewide constitutional office. Pretty interesting story.
A great story. I mean, I think a great immigration story, at a time when, of course, our country is so focused on the issue of immigration, and it's good to also focus on the contributions that legal immigrants make to our country, and certainly Jon King is one of those who, as you said, has served in the military. He has served in public office. He has been a member of law enforcement. Again, an impressive background, I think, and a compelling background as someone here who has now announced that he's going to run for the Republican nomination and the chance to face off against first-term Democrat Jon Ossoff.
Republicans trying desperately to hold on to the majority in the U.S. Senate. Democrat Senator Jon Ossoff now facing mounting opposition as he works to hold on to his seat in 2026.
What's going on, brother?
After launching his campaign on Monday, Insurance Commissioner John King started making fundraising calls, starting with his fellow Army soldiers. King, a retired National Guard general, former Doraville police chief, and the first statewide Hispanic elected officer. King says his military background makes him the best choice.
There ought to be somebody in that chamber that understands the consequences, that when we put our young men and women in danger, that we need to be able to come back and look at their parents and look them in the eye and says, I thought hard about this, that we're spending your tax dollars on something that's worthy of your sacrifice.
The first Republican to enter the race, Representative Buddy Carter, representing coastal Georgia, a pharmacist often advocating for lower prescription drug costs.
I was the one who saw the mother in tears as she tried to figure out how she was going to pay for the antibiotic for her child. I set out to do something about that, and I have done that since I've been up here. I've worked tirelessly to improve health care in the state of Georgia.
Carter's campaign ad attacking Ossoff for his stance on border regulations and voting against a ban on trans athletes competing in girls' sports.
You know, look, I'm running on my record, and I have a very conservative record.
Both Carter and King branding themselves MAGA warriors. King co-chaired President Donald Trump's 2020 Georgia campaign and says he's talked with his team about the potential of an endorsement.
Now I have to show through performance. And they're not going to, they're going to support who they think has the best pathway to this. I have to earn it.
Senator Ossoff's team sent us this statement saying Senator Ossoff will defeat any challenger. While the GOP primary field scrambles to outmaneuver each other and audition for Donald Trump's support, Senator Ossoff's campaign is already building the most effective and unstoppable turnout effort in Georgia's history. In Atlanta, I'm Abby Kasouris.
There has been polling, and I say this with a grain of salt because polling has proven to not always be the most accurate indicator of what's going to happen in an election. But right now, the early polling shows that Senator Ossoff is actually faring quite well. And these are polls that that show him sort of asking voters. Senator Ossoff running against right now a hypothetical Republican opponent. Some of the polling did ask about whether he would beat Governor Kemp, whether he would beat Marjorie Taylor Greene, and he really, even though those two candidates those two Republicans are not going to be in the U.S. Senate race to run against him, he did fare well against them. So I think that perhaps. There are some politicians who are looking at that saying, you know what, I mean, he is vulnerable. He's a Democrat in a state that has, that has been increasingly more reddish after having been, I guess, purple maybe was back in 2020. But I think that people are watching, Republicans are watching this and making decisions, perhaps based on the fact that they don't want to lose. And historically speaking, that can happen if you are a member of the same party as the sitting president.
Let's play a little word association, Rick, with regarding some of the other candidates whose names are being kind of rumored. And these are some folks who have already run for Senate or have been in the Senate, run Senate campaigns, former congressional officials, some officials even currently with Donald Trump's administration. Former U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler.
Money. She, when she was in the U.S. Senate, and she served briefly and then lost her bid for a full Senate term in 2020. But when she was in the Senate, she had the distinction of being one of the wealthiest U.S. senators. Of course, she has a very successful business background. She's a former owner of the Atlanta Dream. She is someone who is a formidable fundraiser and has seemingly unlimited funds when it comes to her own campaign. And that is certainly something that national Republicans like. If they don't have to pour a lot of money into a race and they can dedicate that money to other, maybe closer races in other states around the country, they like that idea. Kelly Loeffler would bring some major cash to this race.
David Perdue.
China. He was just sworn in literally days ago as the new U.S. ambassador to China. That's a very high-profile role right now as far as the Foreign Service is concerned, to be the top diplomat representing the United States in a country like China at a time when our countries are in the midst of trade negotiations and, of course, see each other as competitors on the global stage. To have been able to serve in the U.S. Senate, as David Perdue did, and now to be able to say that he has served as an ambassador in a foreign country, those are two, I think, very impressive credentials on anybody's resume. The question is, can he run a campaign while serving as an ambassador on the other side of the world, in Beijing? So we'll see about that.
Brad Raffensperger.
Moderate. We were talking about lanes, and that Republicans will take the MAGA lane. Raffensperger will take the moderate lane. He would be someone who would be a more traditional, more establishment, quote-unquote, Republican, someone who has stood up to President Trump during the 2020 election. Of course, the phone call and all of that, we all know how that went down. And so Brad Raffensperger probably lost a lot of support among some hardcore Trump Republicans, but I think he also gained the respect of a lot of more mainstream Republicans, and certainly a lot of independents who play a very important role in general elections.
U.S. Congressman Mike Collins.
So, Laken Riley, Mike Collins, his sort of claim to fame is the fact that he wrote the Laken Riley Act, which is being used as sort of the impetus to go around and enact this immigration policy that the administration has put in place. We are reading about this every day, and Mike Collins was really at the forefront of coming up with the kind of language that this administration is using now as it goes about its policies when it comes to immigration.
And finally, it's a name that has not been circulated among a Senate campaign, but for a completely different race, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. Could he do a pivot?
Well, experience. I think that you certainly have to respect someone who has served in that role as the number two. He has really been there. He's had a seat at the table. He's been able to work with Governor Kemp, as we said, in a very successful Kemp administration. I think that by any measure, people would be able to look at the governorship of Governor Kemp when all is said and done, and have positive view of that. And Burt Jones, just by the fact that he's the number two, puts him in good standing, I think, as far as a potential candidate here for the Republican nomination.
Well, those are just some of the names that are being speculated about in political circles, not only in Georgia, but also across the nation. Georgia has a wide open 2026 governor's race and a very competitive U.S. Senate race next year. And we at Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com will continue to follow all of these and other political developments. Remember, we also have a City of Atlanta mayoral election and wide open municipal elections later this year. Thanks for watching and listening to this edition of Political Update on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com. A reminder, you can watch all of our visual podcasts on our YouTube page and download and listen all of Atlanta News First podcast on your favorite listening device, be it Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, or wherever you listen to and download your podcast. For Rick Volbaum and for this edition of Political Update on Atlanta News First, I'm Tim Darnell.